And good morning to everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the eCoustics podcast. I'm your host, eCoustics Editor-in-Chief Ian White. Today's show is going to be a unique one. Today we're going to tackle a topic that, although covered in some of the technology press, has not yet been covered in any great depth by the specialist audiophile press. And it's actually kind of strange that we haven't covered it now. It is 2022. We live in a digital world where billions of human beings on this planet use billions of wireless devices on a daily basis. And our group this morning comes to us from a very, very, very impressive background. And I want to start actually with Cas Oostvogel, who is actually NAD's product manager based in the Netherlands. Cas has had a very illustrious career. He's worked with NAD for decades. He was at one point, if I believe, NAD's product manager in the UK. He is now NAD's product manager in the Netherlands, and it's wonderful to have him here today on our program. Good morning, Cas.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for letting me be here.
Also joining us this morning from the United Kingdom is someone who has worked in sort of on a really, really, really high level in the audio world for many, many, many years. Andy Dowell is the director of licensing for MQA, and his background is beyond impressive. And when he introduces himself, I would love a short bio because I think people would be quite fascinated to know about all the various things that he has worked on in his illustrious career. Good morning, Andy.
Morning there. Yeah, I'm at MQA helping bring the technology to market on the commercial side of things, signing up new hardware brands, but also working with the streaming companies that want to use the technology as well as some of the service companies around us. But over my career, I've worked in this industry bringing audio technologies. For 15 years, I was at Dolby Laboratories, bringing their technologies into cinema and games, car audio, hi-fi TVs as well. So it's great to be doing this now, and it's great to be having this conversation on a pretty serious topic that affects us all in this industry.
Absolutely. And also joining us this morning is someone whom has, I guess, had to say that he's had an illustrious career in the world of high-end audio would be an understatement. Greg Stidsen is basically responsible for our listeners for almost, is it an overstatement to say almost every significant piece of NAD equipment that has come out for the last few decades? And if you've ever purchased a piece of NAD equipment, especially in the last decade or so, Greg has been sort of the driving force behind NAD's transition from, I guess it's fair to say, from traditional Class AB amplification, into the digital world. And it's actually quite an honor to have Greg Stidsen this morning on the program with us. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction. Maybe it's a little overstatement to say that I've been responsible for all the great NAD products, but I think what I have done is I've taken the ethos of NAD that was started back in the 70s and brought it forward into the digital age. So honoring the storied brand and bringing it forward into the new millennium here.
It's funny. Our topic for today is interesting because as a parent, I get bombarded with green energy and save the planet messages from my children, like almost on like a daily basis. As someone who's not really what I would call a conservationist, and actually before I continue, Brian Mitchell is also on the program with us, joining us this morning from sunny California, where it's only 6:30 in the morning. Brian, I apologize for not introducing you.
No problem.
At the very beginning.
You, Ian. Thank you, Ian. Great to be here, and welcome everybody to the podcast.
Energy conservation and the carbon footprint has become one of the lead stories, sort of this decade, for sure. And, one of the things that is not spoken about enough in the audio space and also the home video space is, the impact that, our use of, audio technology, streaming technology, but also the music and video content that we consume how our voracious appetite for streaming 24/7 has actually had an impact on the environment. And it's not really a topic that we discuss. I know that when we write reviews, it's never something that we discuss. We never talk about, how using an amplifier all day long or using a streamer all day long, streaming, a MQA encoded, file on title. It's not something that we think about. I mean, I've never in my life watched a movie on Netflix and thought, gee, I wonder how much energy, how much pollution I'm causing in the world. And I think most consumers would never even think about this, so two of the companies that have been sort of very involved in this issue have been MQA and NAD. And, Andy, I'm going to start with you because I think it would be important for you to sort of explain to the audience, why this is an issue, and how our, almost obsessive appetite to stream everything. I mean, because we all walk around with cell phones practically, strapped to our hip 24/7. How is that behavior affecting the carbon footprint, but also, energy consumption in general?
Yeah, well, and you've hit the nail on the head there, that in fact, a lot of people use streaming services, whether it's video streaming services or audio-only streaming services, without really thinking that there is an impact on what they're doing. But to watch, let's say, an hour of Netflix or YouTube or any video content in a day releases about 55 grams of carbon. So if you think that someone might stream 2 hours a day over the course of an entire year, the amount of carbon dioxide that releases from the servers from storage, but mainly from the networks that get the content to your mobile device or to your home, that's like one and a half trees per person, the equivalent of CO2 that would be needed to offset that. So when you scale that up to hundreds of millions and billions of people around the world streaming video to their devices, and one of the key differences compared to days of old is that when you think about old style broadcast, it was one broadcast that went out to many, so it was a one to many scenario. But here in the modern world, we're talking about different members of the household streaming different things in different rooms, so it's a one-to-one stream. So in fact, the problem only gets exacerbated by the fact that every individual has his or her own carbon footprint, and it's not what a household, for example, that has the carbon footprint. So yeah, and you can compare music streaming to CDs of old. A lot of people have been saying recently, well, how does streaming compare to the footprint of CD? And really, to manufacture a CD, there was a carbon footprint, of course, and to ship it around the world. But it was about the equivalent of listening to an album 18 times to make it, and then let's say 27 times to make it and ship the CD. So if you stream an album more than 27 times, then in fact CD would have been greener than streaming it. But any more than about 27 times, and in fact the carbon footprint of streaming is worse. There's two elements to it. There's storing the data in a cloud, and then there's moving the data to you. The storage side is actually quite minimal in comparison to moving the data around the planet. And that's quite shocking, because if you knew behind the scenes what happens, the 60, 70 million tracks that makes up a streaming service for music, they're stored multiple times all around the world. And they're also stored multiple times by every streaming service. So there are hundreds of instances of the whole catalog of music stored all around the world, if not thousands. But actually, storage is really only 1% of the problem, and 99% of it is actually getting these one-to-one streams from the cloud to anyone who clicks play at any given moment in time.
Is there any specific research in regard to, which markets in the world are, I guess, the biggest criminals in that regard? Though, I mean, the markets that obviously, I mean, in North America, everyone streams. Our access to streaming is everywhere. I mean, in your car, on your cell phone, on a tablet, on a laptop, on a I mean, basically, when you use a wireless, I mean, if I'm using like a Blue Sound or a Dolly wireless speaker, I'm streaming. And when you figure how many televisions the average American or Canadian household probably owns, and how many people live in those households, and everyone watching a different movie at the same time, um, is North America the worst, or are Europe and North America sort of on even ground in that regard?
Really, any market where the population is well connected from a mobile and a home broadband standpoint, this is a problem, and it's going to be more more evident than in nations where the population isn't as well connected. So it's not a North American or European or Asian problem particularly. What changes is, and it's not so much the amount of time they spend streaming, because people are awake for a certain time of the day, and a child in Europe and a child in North America and a child in Asia is going to stream as much content one as the other. The main thing is just the types of content they stream. Some are snacking more on 5-minute or 2-minute clips, whereas other demographics are streaming half an hour or an hour's worth of programming. But the carbon effect is the same in all those markets, because it's linked to how much time over the course of a day.
Is music a bigger issue than video?
Music is in some respects a lesser issue than video, because the file sizes are smaller. So in general, video files tend to be bigger than music. But then again, music has some challenges as well, and some opportunities to actually do better, because video, one thing that can be said about video is that every bit of data is packed with useful information, whereas actually audio suffers a bit from actually having a bit of wasteful data in there that is being sent out, because audio files aren't as richly packed with information as video files are.
Right. Greg and Cass, NAD has been one of the, I think it's fair to say, one of the leaders in the high-end audio space, when it comes to creating, I guess the word, I don't know if using the word green is the right one, but NAD has been very, very sort of conscious of, I guess their ability, NAD has been very conscious of, the amount of energy that their components actually consume while being used. And over the last decade, the company has taken enormous strides to actually, I think it's fair to say, reduce the amount of energy that the components use. And a lot of it has to do with the transition from traditional Class AB into Class D and the other technologies that NAD uses in its components. And I'd like you both to sort of explain to the audience, the company's philosophy, and also what, the company is planning on doing going forward even.
Well, who would you like to start that one off?
Greg, Greg, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, it's an interesting story because, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the European Union started putting together a set of regulations for reducing toxic materials in products. It was called ROHS, ROHS.
Right.
And it banned the use of lead, solder, and some of the other very toxic materials. And as we responded to that, we started looking a little further into the future. And of course, going back to the 70s, really, there was a strong awareness of environmental degradation caused by human beings. So it wasn't a new topic, but it was not a topic that, for the most part, audiophiles were interested in. They're primarily interested in audio performance and not in sustainability. But it became obvious to us that this was going to grow as an issue, and so we did take some steps beyond the mandatory ROHS regulations. And I would say the two key technologies we developed that addressed this issue. One was modular design construction. We were seeing just a terrible waste of resources when you buy an AV receiver and a year later it won't play the latest format, and you have to get rid of that one and get another one. And it just seemed ridiculous to us that you get rid of the chassis, the power supply, the very good amplifiers, the displays, the remote, I mean, all of the things except for the HDMI input. So that's really where the light went on, and we said, can we modularize this? It has a benefit for the consumer that they can upgrade their products. It has a benefit for the environment in that we're not filling landfills with perfectly good AV receivers.
Right.
And there are some advantages for us as a company to speed our development and be able to offer new technology sooner. So it was one of those things that was a win-win-win for us and for the consumer and for the society in general. And then the other one would be digital amplification, which when you go back to 2000, there was a lot of promise shown, but as I'm sure everyone in this panel would agree, it sounded pretty dreadful. It did not come even close to the very highly refined and developed analog amplifier technology. So we set out to really change that, and there were some very promising new things coming along. And the first one was a true direct digital amplifier. It was basically a DAC that could amplify and drive a speaker. And we partnered with a company that had a patent on that and brought that to market as the M2 amplifier, the Master Series M2. And that was, I think, around 2006. And that really was one of the very first amplifiers that, you know, regardless of what the technology was, it was just a great sounding amplifier. And frankly, it was, I would say, a high risk that we kept pushing that direction. We used that success to give ourselves permission to maybe go a little against the grain and start to eliminate all of our Class AB and Class A amplifiers and develop much more efficient technologies going forward. And that's what we've done. That's where we are today.
Cass, do you find that in your market, especially because you're based in Europe, that Europeans are more sort of aware, more conscious of this, and that there is sort of more of a demand for more energy efficient components, a greater emphasis on sustainability? I know that with some of the conversations I've had with European audiophiles, there are a number that I've met over the years, you know, who have actually asked me if components that we review are green, and they were all based in the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Austria, and it was fascinating because I've never been asked by a North American audiophile, oh, is this amplifier green and, you know, sustainable? I've only heard that from European audiophiles, and I'm curious about that.
Perhaps I think it's actually true that Europeans may be a little bit more environmentally conscious than many other parts in the world. And that already exemplifies in simple things that paper, plastics, and let's say normal compostable waste is all collected separately, so it doesn't go into all one great bin and just chucked into landfill. Another thing is, and that is through the way also governments work, and with the EU, there are regulations, and Greg already referred to it, to ROHS, which came into play early 2000, 2002, 2003, which banned actually the use of lead, cadmium, mercury, and a whole bunch of other substances in existing products, which can have a detrimental effect for many, many years to come. The nice thing of that, and if you look at NAD, for instance, we sell a lot of our products in Europe. And the fact that we then also design our products actually has a good benefit for the rest of the world, because we don't change our products for other parts of the world. So they indirectly benefit from lack of cadmium and all of these other nasty goodies as well. Long story short, yeah, I think there may be something in it that there is a bit more consciousness on environment.
One of the things that I think is very different about North America versus Europe is that I know that modular and smaller components are much more popular in the European market. North Americans, just the way that we tend to overbuild everything here. Those of us who have lived in large North American cities like Toronto and New York and Washington, everyone wants the bigger house. And as a result, because we have a bigger house, we have more space. We don't care if we have a rack full of equipment. But I know from my experience living in the UK for a year as a teenager, that media rooms and dens and living spaces tend to be a little smaller in Europe, and that consumers tend to look for products that are more easily placed, use less energy, tend to be something that doesn't over sort of take a room, because in North America we don't care. It's part of our nature. It would bigger and better here. So Cass, did you find that NAD's move in the last few years to smaller, more compact components, the M10 V2 and the D3045, those type of components fit so easily in a small living space, yet offer really every possible connectivity option that you could possibly want? Do you find that has really, I guess, done really well in the Netherlands and I guess in that part of Europe?
It has. Although I also got to say that we were equally surprised at how well like a D3045 has done in North America, and perhaps to a slightly different demographic that it would be with more younger people that would place it right next to their laptop rather than in a living room type of environment. By the same token, the M10 to which you just referred, that has been a really huge success all over, and I think this is where technology shows that it doesn't need to be big and bulky anymore. And this is a trend, I'd like to think that we're pretty much in front of. And with some of the new products that we've been introducing and our sister brand Blue Sound, it's compact, it's energy efficient, yet sounds bloody good.
Right. Now, Andy, MQA has been involved with Tidal now for a number of years. And, I think, a lot of consumers don't necessarily even audiophiles might, but mainstream consumers don't understand, what MQA does. And I think that's been a failure on the part of the audio press, trying to explain in sort of, simple terms, what MQA's value is and why it actually makes, essentially streaming easier, and why it improves, the performance. And I'm wondering if you could quickly, before we get into some of the solutions that you guys are doing, but just sort of explain to consumers why MQA is so important, in the streaming sense.
Well, yeah, there are three really key benefits to MQA to the audiophile, whether it's for streaming or downloads. The first is that when you take a sound and you digitize it and you turn it into digital for mixing and mastering, but then also to make it easily transferable to a consumer and played back. There are some key problems with analog to digital conversion and then digital to analog conversion. So that process of taking a sound from the natural world and then turning it back to an analog sound to feed speakers or headphones, those are parts of the chain that have distortions in them and that nobody before has tried to resolve. And so there have been all these digital lossless technologies out there, MLP for DVD audio and Dolby True HD and DTS Master Audio for Blu-ray, and then FLAC and Apple lossless that was used more on the music side of things. And they're all well and good. They're like WinZip for audio, all of those, because they're lossless. They get you the ones and zeros from the studio and they get them to your home. But the key thing is they don't tackle the problems of how the bits were created in the first place in the studio and what happens when you play those back in your consumer device. And so that's the real quality improvement of MQA, is that these masters, an MQA master sounds more like real life. A piano sounds more like a real piano. A voice sounds like a real voice. And that's because MQA masters have more resolution in them. They're more time domain detail. So that was the quality aspect. How can we make digital sound more like analog? And it's really evident when you take an analog master in a studio and then you turn it into digital, and even the mixing engineer, you go, well, that doesn't sound like the analog master. And the mixing engineer will say, well, of course it doesn't, because that box is introducing problems and this box is introducing. So the mixing engineers are all well aware that digital never sounded as good as analog. And MQA is the first codec that's gone out, set out to tackle those problems. The part that we're kind of talking about today, which is the efficiency of MQA, is we make files smaller. In a 192K 24-bit master, we think of it as audio files, as some holy grail, jam-packed full of amazing information about the music. But in fact, a 192K 24-bit master, only about 20% of it is actual information. The other 80% is just wasted data, wasted space. I mean, you look at one under a microscope or on an analyzer, and you realize that audio files in a studio just have very little information in them compared to video, as I talked about earlier. So the efficiency of MQA says, well, there's pointless burning bunches of CO2, sending these huge files all around the world, when really there's no information in them about the music, or only 20% of them. So that's where the efficiency comes from. And some of your listeners might say, well, what about FLAC and Apple lossless? Surely they make the problem better. Well, it's still 60% of a FLAC file is wasted data for a 192 kilohertz master. So that's all about efficiency and about sustainability, and meaning we can send the best versions to consumers and fans, music fans, without having a detrimental effect on the environment, and doing it in a way that means that they can stream it to more devices because the quality of services is better. There's less problem with bandwidth. So those are the two kind of quality aspects and sustainability. And the last one is just giving you the assurance that what you get is the master that was created at Warner or Universal Music or Sony Music. The MQA Lite that comes on is a real guarantee that no one has broken the stream between the rights holder making it and you playing it back in your consumer device.
I mean, I'm sure there are environmentalists who would scream at the five of us, why don't you just go back to listening to MP3s? Because, that would take up the least amount of, bandwidth. But as a group that is, kind of committed to, better sound quality, for all, and for allowing consumers to experience music and video the way that actually it really needs to be experienced. Because, our argument with naysayers has always been, when people say, why should I buy a more expensive stereo? Why should I buy a more expensive home theater system? It's because that's really the only way you're really going to see the film or hear the album or hear the stream in a way that the artists themselves actually wanted you to hear it. And when you watch Star Wars, it's funny, I don't hear anyone complaining when they watch Star Wars on an 8K projector on a 200-foot screen in an IMAX theater, that the experience is wasting energy in the environment. I mean, people line up for days to watch an Avengers film, in the best possible quality in a Dolby Cinema, like here in the U.S. So people have very selective rage when it comes to things when it comes to the environment. Now, I'm curious about, especially Greg with NAD, are there any specific initiatives, whether within the audio industry or within, I guess also, Andy, this applies to you as well, within the music industry, that companies and organizations are sort of doing to sort of, number one, lower the carbon footprints of streaming, and also the impact of electronics? But has the industry actually really done anything, or is it more individual brands like MQA and NAD that have decided to actually make this a focus?
Yes, I'm not aware of an industry-wide organization that's focused on this issue. I think it is more up to individual brands, and ultimately it's up to individual consumers to demand from the industry a more efficient form of music delivery and music appliances that use less energy. It's, in our world, it's really driven by consumer demand more than anything else. We've sort of taken some steps on our own to improve things, but it's never been the focus of our marketing to say, oh, we're the greenest or anything like that, because really what people want to know mostly is, how good does it sound? How easy is it to use? I would say the sustainability is not high on the list, at least not for the traditional audiophile. I think, as Koss indicated earlier, the younger music lovers definitely are much more conscious about it and have a lot to teach us older people about sustainability. And so we should be listening to our children and grandchildren. So.
Yeah, by the same token, I'd like to add one of the things that we've changed, for instance, with our large master series, which you guys are probably familiar with.
Yes.
Good old chunky big boxes. They actually come, by comparison, in pretty environmentally friendly packaging. It's all paper pulp. There is no plastic or styrofoam involved. And that was quite a job to have something, and still, because whatever you do, there is still that unboxing experience.
Right.
And to do something with paper pulp that still felt like, well, I'm unpacking something special here. And I think we managed to do that, and having taken that first step, and also for Blue Sound, where we use a similar sort of packaging, is something that will continue to develop. But as Greg says, yes, our first values obviously are also performance, and they can be at odds, and that's why I think Class D has been such a great improvement as well.
Yeah, on the music industry side of things, in fact, there has been some movement in this area, and the major record labels, along with some of the independents like Beggars or the Secretly Group, signed a music climate pact late last year, late in 2021, and that basically they're signing up to trying to reduce the and achieve a 50% reduction by 2030, and then a net zero status by 2050. So they're aware that, in fact, streaming has an impact on the environment, and they're benefiting from the growth in streaming numbers. In fact, if one thing can be said about the recent pandemic is it's brought more and more consumers to streaming services, whether that's subscription video services or subscription music services. So we're all enjoying, this kind of growth in the music industry, which is great for audiophiles. It's great for all of us. It's showing that people are investing and innovating there. But I think one of the key things, back to one of your earlier comments about, should we all go back to MP3 or AAC? The key thing is that a topic like sustainability in the environment is never going to halt innovation, and it's never going to halt the consumer's desire for better things, for 2K, 4K, 8K video, or whether it's lossless audio or high-res audio. And if it was that important, then some of the world's best nature documentaries, like The Blue Planet from the BBC, that would be done in black and white and mono. But instead, they're shooting them in high dynamic range video and surround sound audio. And so the key thing is for us all to work together and make sure that we're innovating in a sustainable way, and that we're thinking about it, and just stopping and saying, well, could this be done more efficiently, or could this be done better? We shouldn't all stop and regress 20, 30 years just because this topic's on the table.
Now, one of the biggest changes over the last decade, and Brian will agree with me because we spent half our time editing headphone reviews. The headphone industry in particular has grown by leaps and bounds over the last decade. I mean, the high-end audio industry has been sort of integral in sort of growing the premium headphone market, but I mean, NAD and PSB offer wireless headphones. Almost every major brand in the world right now either makes headphones or is getting into the headphone space. And if you walk down any street in London, New Hampshire, Amsterdam, LA, New York, you will see millions of people walking around wearing wireless headphones, whether they're AirPods, the PSB, the MU4. It's you will see headphones everywhere, and almost all of those headphones, in many cases, are being connected to a mobile device that is streaming from the cloud whether it's high res audio or whether it's video and audio, because, especially in New York, people tend to walk aimlessly through the streets, with their cell phone in their hand watching a Netflix movie. And, has there ever been, or has anyone actually started any research into the impact of the fact that by the year 2027, the headphone industry is going to be a $20 or $30 billion category, which if you break it down, that means that billions of people on the planet are going to be listening to music via headphones. And I'm wondering, on the compression side, the codec side, we've seen Bluetooth, sort of aptX evolved. There's now so many different versions of it. aptX, it's called high res, was introduced in 2021. It still hasn't really shown up in any products, but we're heading into a space where Bluetooth technology is starting to be able to do high res streaming. It's not there yet, but it's going to get there. And I'm wondering if the insane growth of headphones is only going to exacerbate this problem, because on a given day, I probably, as I walk around my house working, and may take phone calls from Brian and yell at my children via their iPhones, we stream an incredible amount of data through into headphones. And I'm wondering if that obsession is going to make, the sustainability and carbon footprint thing worse. I'm wondering if the three of you have any thoughts on that as we all sit here wearing headphones.
Well,
I would go ahead.
No, go ahead, Greg. You're in a better place.
I was just going to say, listening to music on headphones is very efficient compared to driving a big pair of loudspeakers with a power amplifier. So, it is a very efficient way to listen, and you can get extremely good sound quality from something that's battery operated. And as we improve the technology to get high res audio wirelessly into headphones, and there are people working on this problem, I think we'll see advancements in that area as well.
Yeah,
Andy?
I mean, certainly the obviously wired headphones don't have the problem of needing to be charged, and they don't have batteries inside them, because sometimes you also have to think about the environmental impact of disposing of some of the materials that are in these. So, headphones that have batteries in them are obviously going to be harder to dispose of. But in general, to Greg's point, if they're being used as an alternative to driving loudspeakers that are going to be pulling a lot of current out of the wall, with their amplifier, maybe, then yeah, they're not necessarily that bad for the environment in that regard. And the fact that they're being used more and all the time, I think, again, that's an area where we can't stop that. That's how the human race is moving. People are being more connected. They are talking to each other more on voice chats, etc. And so the innovation will come in actually having processors that run on these devices that use less battery power, and batteries that are more efficient and easier to dispose of. And we are seeing that innovation already. The kind of processors that we're seeing behind the scenes in the industry now will draw a lot less current to run in a pair of wireless headphones than the stuff that's currently out in the market today.
Cass, I'm curious, in the Netherlands, is it a thing like it is here in North America to effectively just walk around all day with a pair of earbuds or headphones on your head? Because I can tell you, as someone who takes the train into New York City on a regular basis from my home in New Jersey, everyone's wearing headphones, and it doesn't matter if they're teenagers or millennials or even older adults. Everyone seems to own a pair of headphones, and I'm curious if the Netherlands is just as bad or worse.
I think the Netherlands is just as bad, and but it's also, to a large extent, a generation thing. Because I guess that many of the older generation things at home, they'd still be listening to speakers. Whereas if I look at my kids, and to some extent to my chagrin, they don't own a pair of beautiful speakers and amplifiers. They do everything with the headsets, even when they're at home. So that it seems to be a culture change. And yes, if I look out at the street here, I can see 2 or 3 people already walking around with earbuds in. It's the new normal
Right.
in that sense.
Greg, you mentioned initially that that one of the things that NAD was very cognizant of was the fact that the company was noticing that effectively, especially with AVRs, that as new technology was evolving and new formats were coming out every year, that more and more AVRs were ending up in landfills. And I think that one of the things that has always concerned me about the headphone industry, as an editor in chief of a publication, is that headphones have become almost a commodity, and and people dispose of headphones almost like it's nothing. I know that. I mean, I can't speak for any other city, but I mean, just walking around where I live on the Jersey Shore, or walking in Manhattan, or walking in DC. I see headphones lying on the ground all the time, and I've seen people toss earbuds in the trash on the metro in DC when they stop working. And and I'm wondering if the industry has thought about the fact that with billions of people buying, at this point I don't even know what the number would be right now, but billions of people walking around the planet wearing headphones, we're going to start filling up landfills with millions and millions and millions of pairs of headphones every year, as consumers basically go from a $20 pair of cheap earbuds they buy at a gas station to a pair of expensive wireless NAD PSB headphones, or or they buy a pair of wireless noise canceling phones at an airport. I mean, I know as a traveler, you find headphone stores now in almost every major airport in Europe, in North America, in Asia, and people tend to throw them away like really quickly. I mean, if I was to add up the number of headphones my children have broken, they forget thrown away. I mean, I have 3 kids under 19. My kids have probably broken 20 pairs of headphones in the last 5 years alone, and that all has to end up somewhere. So I'm just wondering if our intense love of mobile technology and headphones is going to almost create a similar problem. 10 years down the line, we're going to walk into a landfill and be like, wow, we're going to see millions and millions and millions of pairs of headphones that have been tossed. I'm just throwing that out there. It's something that actually,
yeah, I don't have an answer for that, Ian. I mean, I share your concern. My only comment would be that we try to build products that people want to keep for a long, long time, and
right.
And cherish and use and appreciate. And I think in general, if you buy the better thing, it's, it has a long-term use, a long-term life, and it's overall better in that regard. But certainly, that's more at a community level, how you properly dispose of, all the consumer products that we have in our lives. So, so I don't have a really good answer for your query.
Well, and I think it comes back to as well a comment Greg made earlier, which was sometimes in the hardware industry, it comes down to individual manufacturers, deciding what their responsibility is going to be. And I think when you look at this year's CES show, a lot of the big brands are really taking this seriously now, and taking it seriously, not just so that they've got a green story for their website, but really so that they are minimizing their impact. And when the big brands get behind it like that, they start to look at ways of actually dismantling these products and recycling them as much. I'm sure some of your viewers have seen some of the great videos online of smartphones being taken to pieces by robots, and every component that can be recycled, or every metal that can be collected and reused, because obviously that all these industries are struggling with getting components and precious metals at the moment. So so I think that's one side of it. And also every industry, I think, goes through that boom phase of people replacing them really quickly. But then over time, as Greg says, when they get hold of a device that they really love and that they cherish, and that they've maybe spent a bit more money on, they'll keep it a bit longer. And the great thing in the headphone space is that they don't tend, yes, they maybe break every now and again, but technologically they don't tend to be obsolete quite as quickly. I mean, a Bluetooth pair of headphones that was bought 3 years ago will still talk to a smartphone that has just been bought this year. So we've certainly seen it with smartphones. People are replacing their smartphones less often now than they did, 5 years ago.
Right. And I mean, the last 2 years on the planet have been obviously very unique. Because I mean, no one foresaw the pandemic, and obviously the pandemic kept tens of millions of people at home, and obviously hundreds of millions of people at home, and and streaming, both video and music, went through the roof. I'd be curious to see like a chart of the last 5 years and how 20 and 2021 into this year, impacted. Were impacted by the pandemic, and also, as we're seeing with the war in Ukraine, Europe has a very, very different perspective on the use of energy. Europeans have to be much more sort of, I guess, concerned, as to their sources of energy. And that's probably also explained why there's been such a hard push in regard to green. I mean, right now in North America, Brian, Greg, and I will tell the both of you that, all we see are very, very high gas prices, regardless of where you live. I know Brian pays a frightening amount of money in California to fill up his car. And I know that Brian even moved over to, I think, even an electric car, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's kind of, you know, inflation in the US and Canada has made a lot of people become a little more energy conscious. I know that when I go to the gas pump, a couple times a week, unfortunately, because of the car that I drive, I look at my wallet empty as the price of petrol goes through the roof, and I know that heating bills actually in the United States and Canada have been extraordinarily high, and all of us are trying to figure out ways to lower our monthly electricity bills because it's killing us, and so I think that the audio industry has an opportunity in a way to appeal to consumers and say, look, we're creating products that are more energy efficient, and at the same time that we want you to enjoy your favorite movies and your favorite music in the the highest possible fidelity and the best picture quality, we're actually thinking of ways of actually lowering your monthly energy bills by actually creating products that are more green and sustainable. And that's something that I would love to actually see the industry get behind. I just think that everyone right now is looking at the price of oil and the price of gas and electricity and what we actually spend also in North America every month on streaming. I think that's another part of the equation. Like if you sign up for Tidal, Qobuz, Spotify, Netflix, Disney Plus, Vudu, Hulu, I mean, you're spending a fortune every month, and also the whole cable cutting thing here in the U.S. is starting to take on a little bit more momentum because consumers are looking at ways to save money. So I really think that both the music industry and the hardware side of the industry have some enormous opportunities, in the years ahead to kind of, both sell their technology, but also promote, sustainability and greener living. I actually want to thank all three of you this morning for actually this very informative discussion. It's good to see that both NAD and MQA are actually sort of at this point almost carrying the torch. I think that's a pretty accurate description for it. The two brands, are really sort of carrying the torch in this regard. And I applaud, both of you, all of you, for actually, doing this. I think it's something that the audio and video industry needs to really think a lot more seriously about because, as we've discovered in the last 2 years, issues tend to rise up, and clock us in the head when we don't see them coming. And it's an important one. So, Cass, Andy, and Greg, I want to thank all three of you this morning for this very, very stimulating conversation. And, and to our viewers, please actually read more in depth about this topic on our website. We have articles that you can actually already research. We're going to be adding some research papers to the video podcast as well, and it will be available next week on the website. So to the three of you, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, Brian, as always, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Great. Many thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the eCoustics podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe and comment. The eCoustics podcast is produced by Mitch Anderson of Black Circle Studios. Original music by The Arc of All. Voiceover provided by Todd Harrell of SSP Unlimited. As always, get up-to-the-minute news and product reviews at www.ecoustics.com. Until next time, keep listening and stay high-five.
This episode of the eCoustics podcast is brought to you in part by Black Circle Radio, all vinyl radio programming since 2009. For more information, please visit www.blackcircleradio.com.